Christopher Nolan has developed a reputation as one of the few remaining artisans in Hollywood. Perception begat by his philosophically minded style of storytelling and nurtured by a string of releases that achieved high regard in popular culture. One that encouraged a generation of first-year film buffs to look deeper. Unfortunately, there seems to be a belief going around that he peaked with 2011's Inception, the paprika-inspired heist movie about a team of thieves infiltrating dreams to receive and plant information. It's a perfect display of his writing tropes, noir style, and commitment to practical set pieces, converging in a movie that whatever hot take people want to have about his work now. But for me, Nolan's following entries kind of lack the same impact they did in the 2000s. They simply fit the bill of movies that big directors do. A space movie, a war movie, a biopic. These films haven't particularly caught my attention, and discourse seems at best pretty split on the man. Except, I skipped one. A very strange entry. Not because it's a stylistic divergence, rather, so much the opposite that it's uncanny. It's a film that appears to almost be a parody of Nolan's filmography, to the degree that it ends up becoming just as good as one. The movie I'm talking about is Tenet. Okay, so first things first. What makes a Nolan picture? Noir. Phrase that comes full circle in action at the end. Snappy dialogue. Everybody's white. One woman. Hans Zimmer's Star Destroyer 808s. Gray-blue coloring. Suits.
Ensemble.
Christopher Nolan has the kind of status and resume that make his name on a title card a viable form of marketing. His movies look very high-end and professional, both in the sense of technical polish and aesthetic consistency. 7 of Nolan's 12 feature films were DP'd by the same man, Wally Pfister. The last 4, from Interstellar to Oppenheimer, were shot by Hoyt van Hoytema. Nolan has worked with just 4 editors: Lee Smith, Dodie Dorn, Jennifer Lame, and Gareth Heel.
He frequently works with a rotating selection of the same actors, including Cillian Murphy, Michael Caine, Tom Hardy, Gary Oldman, Marion Cotillard, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Christian Bale.
He makes a point to shoot on film, stressing the use of practical effects. He almost always employs Hans Zimmer for the score, and pretty much popularized the use of the air horn sounds in movie trailers. His last 2 have been scored by Ludwig Göransson. Nolan films are usually thrillers with some kind of driving mystery and or philosophical quandary at their core. You might categorize a large portion of his work as neo-noir. You may, however, have noticed that, like classic noir, he primarily follows white male protagonists through a series of snappy dialogue exchanges and dark plot twists. Female characters are limited and rarely drive the plot forward through their own actions. Many can also be seen as femme fatales, women who romantically or sexually entice the protagonist only to betray him and reveal their duplicitous nature.
Not a major failing in a vacuum, but a pattern of infrequent and unflattering female characters is a visible issue.
Talia al Ghul turns out to be Bane's motivation after f***ing Batman. Natalie in Memento manipulates Leonard's condition for her own personal gain. Maul is responsible for Cobb's fugitive status and lives on as a distorted memory. Meanwhile, other female characters include sad wife who never gets her husband to admit that he is tagging in a secret twin for a lifelong attempt to own another magician, astronaut who makes a case for love over reason, exposition request form, and damsel that Bruce Wayne can't get over. There is also an undercurrent of conservatism in his portrayal of Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy. Superhero movies are sort of inherently propaganda, but Nolan's was one of the first to take such a realistic tone to the parallel between Batman and law enforcement.
There's also Al-Qaeda coded villains pushing an eco-terrorist agenda and a villain who uses a populist movement to pursue a secret individual ambition. I don't think it's especially egregious for the steady stream of military advertisements coming out of Hollywood, but it's a valid criticism. People also feel that Inception draws too much from Satoshi Kon's Paprika for Nolan not to have owed him some kind of credit, compensation, or permission. This wouldn't be the first time an American film has grabbed concepts and shot sequences from one of Gon's works wholesale. Most infamously, Darren Aronofsky used this shot from the 1999 film Perfect Blue in Requiem for a Dream, and several others for Black Swan, which is also narratively similar to Perfect Blue. It is a common myth that Aronofsky bought the rights to Perfect Blue, by the way, so stop saying that shit in comment sections. Such a purchase was supposedly in the works, but fell through, and Colin expressed a pretty unsavory feeling toward the so-called homages.
かぶってますよね。かぶってるっていうかパクリなんじゃねえのみたいな。
Inception at least does something pretty different with the idea and doesn't copy entire storyboard panels, but I mean, Colin died around the time Inception released, in relative obscurity compared to these filmmakers and without ever having received their levels of financial success. The lack of vocal acknowledgement of his work by much more famous and wealthy people is pretty fucked. Anyway, that's not what this video is about, so I'll leave it at that. Nolan is, however, a seasoned filmmaker. As such, he often succeeds at achieving spectacle that is a step above the everyday gruel while capturing the snappy rhythm of old Hollywood. They have professional white man energy, and some white dudes are, in fact, good at their jobs. Tenet follows a government agent, only referred to as the protagonist, as he's conscripted into Tenet, a special unit tracking events related to time travel technology, under the command and tutelage of Neil. He's assigned with preventing a Russian oligarch from using time tech to set off a Third World War. In order to achieve this, the protagonist makes contact with the oligarch's estranged wife Kat and dives ever deeper into the temporal onion. Obviously, being a movie with time travel shenanigans, the truth of events in Tenet quickly become complicated. As our characters move forward, the separation between past and future becomes a matter of perspective, and in the face of these revelations, the protagonist is left to question whether he ever had any choice in the outcomes of this story at all. Basically, the protagonist finds out that some of his early run-ins with reverse time things were his future self, and later that he will one day found the organization Tenet. This knowledge that his life has been steered by a version of himself that has yet to exist creates a conundrum of agency. The whole reason he's called the protagonist is to say that he will be the one writing the story even when every factor that led him to this point was predetermined.
I'm the protagonist of this operation.
You are a protagonist.
Is it really having agency if the you who set things in motion isn't the you who goes through the motions? Would Neo have knocked the vase over if the Oracle hadn't said anything? These are compelling ideas to end on, and pretty within Nolan's wheelhouse of poking at space-time and the human mind. Unfortunately, a large number of audiences found this one a bit too much to follow. I suspect this disconnect arose because the movie goes quite a while before any of that stuff actually matters, and most detrimentally for me, because the characters are kind of uninteresting and underwritten.
The protagonist is a suave 007 type.
But he's also our entry point into this universe, and with time travel revelations, we're given the promise of a profound character, but there's just not that much to him on screen. He goes where they send him, does his action sequences, tries to get the pretty lady on his side. I don't know what he really cares about or wants to do. Neil, on the other hand, is a smirky, well-dressed Englishman who's really warm to the protagonist. Ooh, he must know him better than he realizes. Don't know much else about him. Worst of all, Nolan's inability to write women tramples all over the script in the form of the plot accessory that is Kat. Kat is a mother and a wife. That is all there is to her. Her dialogue is atrocious, but it's so atrocious that it just kind of lays out the exact issue with her character better than I could have hoped to.
Everyone and everything that's ever lived, destroyed instantly. Precise enough?
Including my son.
Plot is silly action movie stuff that, even if it does make sense, requires way too much effort on the part of the viewer to parse through. Effort that it frankly doesn't deserve because it doesn't inspire that much intrigue. And so somewhere in the very first exposition scene, chock full of technobabble, I realized I did not need to hear this. And if this scene was a bloated way of simply saying, things travel backwards, then perhaps the entirety of the inverted technology was but an accessory to cool stunts. And upon witnessing the practically orchestrated exploding 747, I realized that an obscured understanding of the plot actually rewarded the narrative. Two blinkers deep, There is no time lost trying to understand how point B fits between A and C. One simply witnesses a man suck a bullet back into his pistol and follows this leading man's confident stride up to the next set piece.
Now, a lot of reviewers seem to be incredibly concerned with understanding how this process of time reversal works. And given the rewarding but for some viewers confusing plot elements Nolan is known for, I get why people would feel that it needs to be accurately understood. But the thing about the noir influence Nolan wears on his sleeve is that if you've actually seen classic noir, a lot of those movies don't make sense. They just move fast enough that it feels as though you're on the hook for some grand conspiracy. And that's more important than actually having a plot that stands up in real-world logic. Because despite there being a Hollywood-mandated exposition scene explaining the reverse technology to us, it's sci-fi gibberish to prep the audience for a cool special effect. I know that's hard to believe about a director who put in a truly impressive amount of research towards space travel physics, but this isn't that movie. This is a slick special agent thriller that wants to stay up to modern trends. Just go with the reverse thing. You will lose nothing. In exchange, you will gain some wonderful action sequences.
And let me reiterate that this is still dad cinema to the truest degree. It's just a little more polished. Took off the snapback, traded the Mazda for a Corolla, worked things out with his girl, got divorced, trying for love again. This is a Bond movie masquerading as a Matrix. It's nonsensical with goofy dialogue and a punchline of a female character. This real crash right here. They don't make them like that anymore. Suddenly, you get that dad's just a dork. Yeah, he's pretty stupid, but you still think there's hope for him. And he doesn't do anything half-assed. Can't fault him on that.